Good day, everyone. I am Dr. Rowena Galarpe, and I am tasked today to share with you a lecture on breaking the bad news in a nutshell. Showing you a disclosure prior my lecture. The objectives of my lecture are the following: to discuss the significance of breaking the bad news, to enumerate and discuss the different models used in breaking the bad news, specifically the Spike six-step protocol. Now, in breaking the bad news, we say that it is one of the most difficult tasks of physicians. And for us family physicians, most especially, we often find ourselves the bearer of the bad news. We are the ones who are being referred to, not to our patients, to give and deliver the bad news, no, and do disclosure to our patients. And what does bad news mean? So according to Bachman and Albach, here are the following. So any news that drastically and negatively alters the patient's view of his or her future results in a cognitive, behavioral, or emotional deficit in the person receiving the news that persists for some time after the news is received. Now, in breaking the bad news, now we have to remember that there are several patient preferences. In most studies, they say that most patients prefer to know their diagnosis, but the amount of information that they want varies among demographics and culture. So in studies, no, in researches, they say that women prefer full details of their diagnosis, no, compared to men. And patients prefer to receive bad news in person with the physician's full attention. No, they want to receive, or they want us to deliver the bad news in person in our clinic, not face to face, instead of over the phone or the message. And they want to be confident in the physician's skill on how are we going to deliver the bad news to them. And there could also be cultural barriers. Now we all know that there are several stigma and beliefs about death, religious diversities that can actually affect on how our patients and even the family can cope and accept the bad news. So how about on the physician side? There could be also physician fears. Physicians experience stress related to providing the bad news, and this stress often extends beyond the actual conversation. They say also that no matter how long have you been in your practice, no, kahit gaano na tayo katagal gumagawa nitong delivering the bad news or disclosure to our patients, the stress does not lessen. Meron pa rin certain level of stress that we feel when we do this with our patients. Physicians also fear that delivering truthful news about a terminal illness, it will leave our patient depressed, hopeless, and with a shortened lifespan if hospice is involved. So how do we communicate bad news? So it is a two-way activity wherein we really have to practice our active listening skills. We have to be sensitive to our patients and we need to empathize with the emotions and reactions of our patients. By communicating also the bad news to our patients, we empower them to make informed choices and future plans for themselves. So here are the physician-related factors when we communicate bad news to our patients. Now, physicians should be honest and truthful, compassionate, caring, hopeful, and informative. So how about the patient-related factors? So again, as I have said earlier, they prefer that it should be done in person with privacy at their own pace. Meaning, hindi yung pagdating pa lang ng clinic, i-disclose mo na agad na ganito yung diagnosis, na terminally ill yung patient natin. We need to give them adequate time for discussion. There could be several emotions and reactions during the sessions. You really have to empathize and give them time to cope with the information that we have provided. And we need to know if they prefer the presence of a supportive person, either it be a friend, a relative, or a family member. So what are the objectives of breaking the bad news? So number one, we want to gather information from the patient. Gusto natin malaman ano na bang alam niya or meron na ba siyang alam. Number two, to transmit the medical information. So we want to provide the diagnosis to our patient. Ano na ba yung prognosis? What could be the treatment options for this patient? Number three, to provide support to the patient. Again, we want to empathize. Number four, to elicit the patient's collaboration in developing a strategy or treatment plan for the future. So here are the three models used in breaking the bad news. So you have the spike, 6-step protocol, ABCDE, and breaks. So these three actually have common themes, no, in all these models. And here are the five. So number one, it emphasizes that we need to establish rapport in an appropriate setting, determine the patient's previous knowledge and desire for details. Full details ba or partial details ang gusto ng patient. We need to avoid medical jargon, support patient emotions, and we need to allow questions. We have to summarize the information that we have given and determine the next steps for our patient. Focusing on one model, no, is the Spike 6-step protocol, which is the most common. And this is developed by Bachman in 1992. So the SPIKES protocol is an acronym for the following: setting, patient's perception, invite patient to share information, knowledge transmission, explore emotions and empathize, summarize, and strategize. So showing you the diagram on how are we going to go about the SPIKE 6-step protocol. So showing you above are the steps, no? SPIKES. And below each box or step are some recommendations, reminders, no? And appropriate responses and statements during the session or delivering the bad news. So the first step, we go through one by one. So letter S, setting up the interview. So what are the three most important reminders, no, or recommendations in setting up the interview? So mental rehearsal. So how do we rehearse? So very first step that we have to know or to do is to review the patient case. It's very important that we know the full diagnosis, no, the laboratory results, the imaging results, and even the biopsy results is also important. So yung patient case, dapat kabisado natin siya, naaral natin siya. So when we go to the knowledge and information giving, no, very accurate information na maibibigay natin sa patient. This also includes mental and emotional preparedness. Again, as I have said, it is a very stressful task, no, and process for physicians as well. The second one would be a comfortable environment. We need to provide this to our patients. No? Dapat may privacy, less, or dapat nga walang distraction at all. And we also need to know, no, another important thing is yung preference ng patient. If they want to include family, no, if they desire to include a friend, a family member, or a relative during the session. So that is your S, the first step, which is setting up the interview. Now, the second step, letter P, we want to assess the patient's perception. What is an appropriate question? What is your understanding of your illness? Ano po ba ang pagkakaintindi niyo sa inyong sakit? Or ano na po ba ang alam ninyo sa inyong kondisyon? No, ito yung mga pwede nating tanong sa pasyente para malaman natin kung ano na ba yung alam nila. So that is your second step, assessing the patient's perception. What is the third step? Letter I. We need to obtain the patient's invitation. Appropriate statement that we can give. How would you like me to give the information about the test results? Now, this is a very important step because we want to know, di ba, yung preference ng patient natin, kung full details ba o partial detail yung gusto niya. Gusto na ba niyang malaman lahat or hanggang saan lang yung gustong malaman ng patient? We need to determine this so that when we give the knowledge, no, and the medical information, it will be accurate and tama kung ano yung preference ng patient. Okay? Doon the fourth step, letter K. This is already giving out the knowledge and information to our patient. Okay? So alam mo na, no? During the invitation stage or step, alam mo na kung ano yung gusto ng patient, full details or partial detail. So what would be an appropriate statement that we can use before giving out the information? Very important that we give a warning sign. No, we usually say, unfortunately, I have some bad news to tell you. Pwede nating sabihin ito, no, na meron po ako mga ibibigay na detalye tungkol sa inyong mga laboratory test at sa inyong biopsy. Ganun po yung mga pwede nating sabihin during giving out of knowledge and information. And after that, when we have already given the warning sign, we will give out the full or the partial medical information based on the patient's preference. Now, what is the fifth step? Letter E. After giving out the information, again, there will be several or different emotions, no, and reactions from our patients, and we need to address those. No, we want to address the patient's emotions and to give out empathic responses. So, what are the appropriate statements? Yes, I can understand why you felt that way. Naintindihan ko po na nalulungkot kayo sa mga impormasyon na sinabi ko or sa diagnosis po na lumabas sa inyong test. Could you tell me more about what concerns you or what concerns you? Now, these are the appropriate statements that we can give when we want to empathize to our patients and to address emotions. Now, how about the last step? This is also very important, no? Yung letter S, strategy and summary. So after giving out the information, you have already addressed the emotions, now you have already empathized to our patient. The last step includes strategize. Now is to strategize with our patient. We give the information, we also give the treatment options to our patient. Ano na ba yung next step? Ano yung magiging future plan natin with our patient? Again, going back to the objective is we want to empower our patients to make informed choices, diba? And to make future plans for themselves and with us as well. Okay? And summarizing also, gusto nating i-summarize yung lahat na napag-usapan during the session. Okay? One example of an appropriate statement would be, I know this is all very frightening news, and I am sure you will think of many more questions. When you do, write them down and we can discuss it again. So gusto natin pa rin i-entertain. Baka naman during the session, nagbigay na tayo ng information pero meron pa pala siya mga tanong. No, meron pa po ba kayong mga hindi naintindihan? Meron po bang hindi malinaw? Meron pa mga gustong tanungin tungkol sa mga naibigay ko pong impormasyon tungkol sa inyong kondisyon. Another important step in strategizing and summarizing would be the follow-up ng patient. Kailan ba natin dapat i-follow up yung patient after breaking the bad news or delivering the bad news? How soon do we ask our patients to follow up? No? Dapat close follow-up. Hindi pwede na nag-breaking the bad news tayo today, then after 3 months or 6 months pa tayo magpapabalik sa patient for follow-up. Okay, so dapat close follow-up siya. So we will know or we can track ano na ba yung naging progress or would there be psychosocial issues arising after your disclosure na kailangan nating i-address. Okay, so that is actually the summary of your Spike 6-step protocol, giving us the recommendations, no, ano yung mga steps and processes that we can do when we do breaking the bad news or when we deliver the bad news. What are the appropriate statements and questions that we can give to our patients? Okay. So what are the learning points of this lecture? Again, emphasizing that most patients now already prefer to know their diagnosis. However, we still have to do yung invitation. We really have to go step by step doon sa Spike's protocol. No, kung full details ba o partial details. And we really have to respect their own preferences in regard to delivering the bad news or receiving the bad news. And breaking the bad news is one of the most difficult tasks, especially for us family physicians. It really requires our active listening skills, really have to develop it and practice it when communicating our bad news to our patients. And it requires sensitivity and empathy to our patients and including to their families. Okay, so that would be all for my lecture, and I will be happy to entertain questions regarding the lecture. And thank you very much for your kind attention.